Well, Patty, I thought the conversation today with Lane from 733 Park about company valuations and ISO structure was just so interesting and insightful.
Oh, so insightful. I mean, to me, it was actually enlightening. I learned things, that I hadn't even thought about. And I think our listeners are going to really appreciate the insights that Lane brings to this week's podcast.
Yeah, then tell us about the story from the Insiders Report. Very interesting.
Yeah, Visa, MasterCard are under pressure in the UK. And, James and I talk about what this could potentially mean for interchange in the US. And then I was really, James had one of his most passionate questions from the field. You want to give everybody
Yeah, I tend to get that way. So
yeah, so about this topic, I know.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones. It's one of these things. I'll leave it kind of vague so that you don't have to listen to it. But it's one of these topics that really infuriates me, where ISOs are acting against their own interests. And as a result, agents are losing out on a fortune. And it's something that you really need to understand as you go into 2022. Well, we do start it off also talking about the impact of flipping your existing merchants to cash discounting and how that can impact your residuals. And I tell a story in there as well. So a lot of good stuff. As Patty mentioned, I get pretty heated about it. So definitely take a listen to that one.
Okay. And James and our audience, this week is our podcast is sponsored by accept.blue. Check them out if you haven't already at accept.blue. Ready to go for the podcast now, James?
Let's go.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Everybody, Patty and I are joined today by Lane Gordon. Lane is the managing director at 733 Park. How are you doing today, Lane?
Great. Thanks for having me on, James.
Absolutely.
Hey, Lance, I love the name of your company. Is it also your address?
No, it came to me strangely in a dream, because prior I had another company specializing in the payment space for a number of years, very long and more of a blue blood sounding name.
Right, right.
Today when you see all these companies changing names to something short that means absolutely nothing.
Right.
It just kind of came to me, something short. I didn't have to spell it 12 times. So
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. Definitely sets you apart.
And a great story.
Well, we're very excited about the topic today. Something we haven't really talked a lot about on the podcast. We're going to be talking really about scaling your ISO. And so whether you're an individual agent or you're a larger company, we're going to be talking today really about the steps to maximize portfolio valuation, answering questions like, should you be a retail or a wholesale ISO, and what does that mean? So we're going to dive into a lot of details today, really a kind of an education of the industry and the structure of ISOs. So, Lane, before we get to that, though, we want to hear your story. How did you get into this crazy industry? And we know that 733 Park came to you in a dream. Give us a little more context, right? How did you end up starting and all of that? So,
sure. No, thank you. So originally, I had actually started right after college. I started a market research company pre-internet. So this is college was a while ago. I built that company. I sold it to AC Nielsen, the same company that I think they still do with television ratings and everything else.
Yeah, sure.
And then I started investing in real estate. And a buddy of mine who was early days in payments said, gee, better than real estate, where you're going to get calls in the middle of the night, especially if you're residential, about a clogged toilet or a leaky roof, is this thing called the payments industry, where you have this recurring revenue stream, but you don't have the leaky roofs and you don't have the clogged toilets. You don't have to deal with the 3 a.m. calls typically. So I know there are some merchants that maybe they do call it 3 in the morning.
Yeah, I'm sure that, we've all known those cases, but for the most part.
Exactly. So that got me intrigued, and I invested early days in a small payments company, and I took an active role as an investor, not a passive one. So my role in that firm was to start finding acquisition targets for them, because even early days in payments, it was apparent to everybody that you were building value through organic and inorganic growth. And I like the inorganic, which was sharpshooting, finding interesting technology or other complementary payments companies or portfolios that could be rolled in to add value. And so I've been doing M&A in the payment space as well as payments tech before the words fintech existed, and a few other terms. And just been doing this for almost 20 years. And then about a year or so ago, I rebranded. I wanted a shorter, to the point name. I didn't have to spell out 12 times. And here I am today at 733 Park.
Love it. Love it. It's great.
Great story.
So I was trying to think about such a big topic, and I was trying to think about how do we unpack this for our audience, because we do have a lot of, individual 1099 agents listening. Some of them are brand new to the industry. Some of them have a 50,000 a month portfolio. Then we have those with big teams. Then we have, executives at large processing companies. So I thought what might be best is let's start small and move towards the larger end of the scale. So Lane, my first question is, for those that are listening that are, 1099 salespeople, they're independent, maybe they have an assistant, but they're pretty much a, one man, one woman show. They've got maybe 3, 4, 5, 6,000 a month in residual, and they're looking to build that and grow that. What are some mistakes that you see that maybe they might make early on, or some insights that, if they hear this advice and they put it into practice, it might help them to better position themselves to get to those next levels and to really maximize their portfolio value?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there's a variety of things. So first of all, somebody starting out, somebody that has is building a portfolio that's maybe at $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000. When you're first starting out, typically speaking, you don't have a lot of leverage to negotiate, right? So you're doing your best as an agent, maybe to compare offerings from different ISOs, and you're trying to get the best split and everything else. But at the end of the day, unless you're tried and true and you have a track record, it's very difficult to negotiate the best deal for yourself. So I guess what I would say in terms of, other than just doing your best initially, the next mistake is staying too long, maybe as an agent level with one group or one contract, and not revisiting it, let's say after you hit 10,000 a month or you hit 20,000 a month, and then determining, gee, maybe it makes sense for me to either get another agent agreement with somebody else, or to renegotiate my agreement, or maybe even to think about, as I start scaling up, registering direct and becoming a full ISO.
Yeah, I love that. And would you also agree too that, kind of in what I see in correlation with that is a lot of agents actually get themselves locked into agreements that they can't get out of. Right. I get calls all the time from agents that say, well, I'm at 10,000 a month. I can't leave. If I do, I'll lose my residuals. Is that something you're seeing as well?
I'm not typically I haven't seen too many like that where they lose the residual, with the exception of way back in the day, the original, and they're not around, so I can mention the name, Card Services, way back in the day.
Right. That's when I first got into business.
Okay, so again, not trying to poo-poo them, but
we all
their
know.
agreement was very, very tough if you were an agent, because effectively your residual could get clipped off at any point in time if it almost, to me, it seemed, looking at those agreements, if you look the wrong way, this thing, that thing, you talk to somebody else, you
dotted the wrong eye.
So effectively, you were building this revenue stream, but you could never sell it, or you can never extract extra value from it by having a transaction with somebody, because you were locked in, and God forbid you tried to sell it and they didn't like, potentially they could clip the whole residual. Typically speaking, I haven't come across a lot of things that are that onerous in the past 10 years, but there may still be. So James, it's a great point. If somebody is getting into something, read that fine print. If they can clip your residual just because you're signing another agent agreement or something else, that obviously should not be that way. Because if you worked hard to build that, as long as you're not trying to move your merchants onto somebody else and you're honoring the spirit of your initial agreement, you should be entitled to those residuals.
And I would actually say it's been interesting dealing with, and I think it's an interesting difference in audience, because I know on your side, Lane, dealing with a lot of more of the M&A and the agents that are building a pretty good portfolio. Generally, what tends to happen in my experience is, I would say 30, maybe even as much as 40% of the new agents that come into the industry do get into these agreements that are very prohibitive. But once they get to 2 or 3, 4,000 in residual, they finally realize, wait a minute, I'm just building a job. Hold on a second.
Right.
And then they end up going somewhere else, but they lose that first 2 or 3,000 a lot of times. And it's kind of a false start. So I think it's super important, like you said, to make sure that they have the flexibility to be able to renegotiate and get a better deal once they have some leverage. So I love that.
I mean, to kind of follow up on that, though, it sounds to me like, even for the independent, they still need to have a structure around their business. We all know that that's a given, right? So, how and when, shall I say, do they need to reevaluate or revisit? Um, you said like in terms of dollars, but I'm wondering if what'd you say? I think you said 6,000 a month, something like that, right? But could it also be the type of business model that the agent or ISO has chosen? I mean, could they have sort of a bench? Is it good to have a benchmark that says go back and revisit the relationship at 5,000 or something like that?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, from my perspective, again, I would think that once the agent figures out where they're going with things, and they start to see traction and they start to have a successful methodology of how they're signing up their merchants,
Right, the methodology, yeah.
now they know they've got a rhythm. Now they know they can
Mm-hmm.
create value. And
Right.
once you feel that, you see that as an agent, I think that's probably a good indicator. Certainly, dollar wise, I wouldn't let things get above $5,000, $8,000, $10,000,
Uh-huh.
because at that point you can't then extract that value for yourself. So
Right.
you can certainly take that brain knowledge and transfer that learning to doing it again. And like
Yeah.
James said, yeah, I agree with you, James. If you're in a lousy agreement and you have the wherewithal to realize it, but now you know what you're doing, if you have to walk away from 2 or 3 thousand a month, that's just the price of doing business, because you can make that 2 or 3 thousand back in short order if you
Right.
really know what you're doing in this business,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and then create value for yourself in the back end.
And it seems to me what you're also saying is there has to be a huge degree of confidence to be able to know when it's the right time,
I
right?
think so. I think so. If you're just dibbling and dabbling in this, and you get a little book or whatever, and it's a very occasional sporadic thing,
Uh-huh.
then maybe it's okay. Maybe you just let it roll at the 2, 3, 4 thousand
Sure.
a month, and it is what it is. But
Right.
if this really is a career and it's something that you're building, at a certain point you got to take a hard look for yourself and make it even more worth your while.
Sure. Yeah,
Good
good.
stuff.
Good
So
stuff.
I want to transition just a little bit, Lane, to two topics. I wasn't sure where to stick them as far as small versus large organizations, because they affect everybody as far as portfolio valuation. I want to talk for a minute about technology integration. So
Hmm.
obviously this is on everybody's mind. Are they selling Clover? Are they selling integrated, Zuza or other point of sale systems? Are they integrating with, virtual terminal, whatever it is, right? So I'm just curious from your perspective, whether it's, larger or small portfolios, what is the impact that you're seeing from that agent or ISO that really is focused on integrating technology with their merchants versus those that are still just slinging the individual terminals and really aren't focused on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I would say there's even a further differentiation, which is, you're integrating into Clover as the example you used, right? So, but now we have to remember that Clover itself is becoming a large platform. So, what is the value add that you're doing? Are you really keeping that merchant sticky, or if you made it sticky for Clover, but another merchant processor that also sells Clover can just come in at another price depending on your agreement and go ahead and at some point in the future grab that merchant? From my perspective, typically on M&A deals, especially as they scale up, somebody that's found a way to integrate, and everybody's talking about ISVs, right? That integrates into a technology partner directly. So some sort of an online website, or let's say a practice management system in a doctor's office, or legal billing software, or anything like that, where you can have some sort of direct connection or APIs that tie into that system. To me, that creates kind of the highest and best integration, because now it becomes very painful for the software company to remove you as the merchant processor or servicer, to remove you from their system. So to me, that's kind of like the highest level of integrated technology, and that translates in terms of what is the price you're going to get if and when you decide to sell the portfolio, sell the ISO, what percentage of your book is integrated. Granted, people will still look at Clover as being, that's great. That's better than just having a standalone terminal that's connected to nothing. But the next step beyond a Clover, for example, would be that direct integration into some sort of software.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, so many more things I'd like to say about that, but I'm not going to. We'll move on because we got time constraints. So the next one is cash discount and surcharge. So again, non-cash adjustment type programs, compliant surcharging. These are hot topics. And honestly, I wasn't sure how it was going to play out initially from a valuation perspective because, your margin is like 3-4 times higher on average, but are buyers still concerned that, maybe these are going to change, margins are going to compress? I'm just kind of curious to, what are you seeing in the marketplace for how this is impacting valuation?
So it's true, and it's a great question. A number of years ago, when some of these programs first came out, it was, I guess, like anything else new, it was very unclear to us in the M&A world. Was this going to add to valuation? I think when somebody like cash discounting, when it first came out, I could actually cite cases where it actually took away from valuation because buyers were real nervous. What does this mean? Is it going to evaporate tomorrow? Well, now we're years past that. And so consequently, the assumption on buyers' part is this thing ain't going away, at least, in the foreseeable future. And so, there's margin compression in everything, but it seems like there's still so much more upside to cash discounting and some of these other programs that we're really not seeing a lot of that. So it's actually giving lift to the value of these books. And again, when it first came out, for a little period, maybe 6 months, it was somewhat the opposite because people didn't know what to make of it.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting too as these two concepts now come together, where initially to sell cash discounting meant a standalone terminal and literally removing the integration a lot of times, where it's like, well, we can't use your point of sale system for this. Now we're starting to see the technology companies are saying, wait a minute, there's enough margin here. We can give our technology away for free, or whatever. And so they're now all of a sudden it's starting to become that, kind of rocket fuel being added to it, which is better technology and the cash discounting. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out with portfolio valuations over the next kind of 36 months. And of course, as we see the legislative and regulatory environment change as well, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, it's but at the moment, it seems to just be adding value because more revenue, and today, that's it. Yeah.
So let's shift, if you don't mind, just a little bit to the basic concept of growing your ISO. Okay, that being an ISV, a merchant sales team. Maybe doing like 20 to 50 deals a month. What should these guys be thinking about? Where should they put their attention for increasing the value of the portfolio? I mean, we talked about cash discounting, we talked about technology, but that's sort of a finite thing, right? I mean, there are strategies to get more customers or to, integrate with more technologies, to partner with, upstream partners. What are some of the things you think they should think about?
Yeah, no, that's those are great questions. And by the way, excuse me if there's a helicopter flying directly over the building here. But so no, those are great questions. I mean, I think what I would say to you in terms of trying to create value. I mean, again, what I see, because typically people are coming to me and we're helping them value these things and bring them to market or whatever it might be. So at that point in time, I start looking at, well, what type of an ISO is this? Is this an ISO that just went for just sheer volume, which some do, right?
Right.
So there's some folks that just, they either throw a ton of money at Google AdWords and some other campaigns, and they're just going for, sign them up as many as you can. And they're a sales machine. And then there's other groups that, although the gross number of new merchants each month is not particularly large, they're either going for a specialty vertical that they're a specialist in, whether or not they have technology, maybe they have advice, maybe they have insight, maybe they're from that, for instance, car dealerships, maybe they used to be in the dealership business. And so they can actually counsel their clients on, how things might work and why their system, who knows, there may be some degree of technology, but ultimately, it's all about creating stickiness and continuing to add merchants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can do that because you're a specialist, you just deal with, for example, cemeteries or flower shop or whatever it
Gosh,
might be.
I hadn't
I
thought
mean,
about that
again,
vertical yet.
well, your cemetery, it's a business going to be around forever. But
Right.
so you're a specialist in that, funeral homes, whatever it might be, you may just by virtue of that have a very sticky base. Or let's say,
Mm-hmm.
for
Sure.
example, you're going on an ethnic play. Let's say your family's originally from another country. You're over here in this country. You've discovered the wonderful world of merchant processing, and now you're just going after, let's say, Vietnamese Americans because you've got certain. You're able to have a support team that can
Sure.
answer their questions, especially for some people who aren't fully capable in English.
Right.
Again, you start to create some stickiness and some added value. And of course, something, and again, as I mentioned in the prior question, anything that has multiple touch points. So particularly software and software integrations where
Sure.
now it's so embedded. And what I mean by embedded, because sometimes I'll see groups that say to me, oh, well, we're in this particular software. And I ask them, well, you're in that, but are you the exclusive merchant services provider, or are you one of 12 or 100
Mm-hmm.
choices that
Right.
the merchant can choose? So, it's great to be in a software company and be a choice. It's okay, but it's phenomenal if you've negotiated a deal where you are the exclusive. So there is no choice. And quite frankly, oftentimes people will sign up for some sort of a SaaS software as a service thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the merchant services are included with whatever web hosting or something else. And that's just the package. And so they're there as long as they're using that provider. The merchant is there. They're processing with you. They're not asking 5 million questions about what the rate is. It just is what it is. So
Yeah.
to me, that's kind of, scaling up and
Right.
but two models, if you may.
Yeah. And I think it's super interesting that, there's a lot of attention paid to, integrating with the biggest platforms.
Mhm.
And what we've been, talking about in the podcast for the last couple of years is, sure, like you said, that's great. But, meanwhile, there's all of these smaller ISVs that have a really specific niche that would love to make some money on payment processing, but they don't really understand the payments industry. They don't want to deal with it. And they would love to have a partner, especially one that can add to their distribution and that's willing
Right.
to go out and pitch it to their client base. Right. So, okay, so let's transition here. I want to start talking about larger organizations.
Mhm.
Kind of in between the small and the large, though, is this idea of a retail versus a wholesale ISO. Now, I actually don't know that we've ever specifically used these terms and defined them on the podcast, to be honest with you.
I don't think we have. Yeah.
So Lane, let's talk about this. Talk about risk a little bit. So, what is a retail ISO? What is a wholesale ISO? Give us a little context here.
Sure. Yeah, so just to give you a little context between retail and wholesale. So effectively, you think about it like this. If you typically, when you're a smaller ISO, you're just starting off and everything else, you have less options, right? Because you have minimal leverage in terms of trying to negotiate and trying to negotiate all these little perks. As you grow, there's more choices typically. And so one of the choices, wholesale retail, wholesale also known as full liability, retail known as zero liability. Now, the issue is typically if you go wholesale, you can pick up a certain amount of basis points, and that varies from agreement to agreement. But let's say for example, maybe it's somewhere between 10 and 20 basis points, right? So some folks that have 40, 50,000 merchants, they may say, wow, that's a lot of basis points. It's worth it for me, but to try and now get a wholesale agreement, but now you've got to have your own risk and underwriting departments. Mm-hmm. And on top of building that and managing it, it's exactly what it is. You have that risk. You have that full liability. So if some merchant is taking all sorts of phony credit cards and they're not shipping merchandise or whatever they're doing there, and you wake up the next morning and there's $300,000 worth of charges, if you can't get that back, that's with you.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a risk reward. Now, what you do get typically when you do become a full liability or a wholesale shop is you also get, as part of taking that risk, portability, which allows you to take the portfolio that you built and potentially move it on to another processor or move it on to another sponsor bank or both potentially. And that has a lot of value because now, as you really build a large ISO or a large portfolio, there's a lot more players that want that book or ISO for multiple reasons, to balance their own bin, to do other things with it. And so it starts to become very, very attractive. That being said, if you're risk adverse, you know how to sell, you just love building these things and building up your monthly residual, you can do retail all day long and just not deal with it. And it's, in this current market, it's still very, very attractive as you scale up beyond 50,000, 25,000 a month, 50,000 a month, 100,000 a month, starts to become attractive to other players for other reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to dig into this just a little bit more in my next question, because you brought up portability, which I was hoping that you would bring that up. I get asked about that all the time. Small ISOs are like, how do I negotiate portability? And I'm like, well, first of all, you don't at your level. Secondly, it means taking on risk and underwriting and all this. So we have this conversation. So let's talk about these larger organizations. So, they're doing, more than 1,000 deals a year, and so they might be doing, 5,000, 10,000 deals a year. They've already got a big portfolio, 30, 40, 50,000, mids. So 2 questions I have. Mm-hmm. Number one, help them understand, why is portability so much more valuable and so important to an FIS, a Fiserv, a TSYS, or whatever, right? Why is that more valuable? And then also, are there other tips or insights that you would give these larger organizations that are looking to maybe exit in 3 to 5 years, of what are some things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and I will, I'll add a little curve in there, which is, I have seen a handful of retail agreements that did appear to have portability.
Wow, that'd be great.
Yeah, somewhat of a very rare creature in 20 years of doing this thing.
Sure.
I have seen a couple, but again, the only way to achieve that, as you just said, James, is as you've scaled up and now you've got that negotiating power and leverage. So, in terms of why is it much more valuable? And again, I want to be careful because there's definitely a bump in valuation if you've got this fully portable book, right? But it doesn't mean that if you built a retail book that's 300,000 a month, for example, or 100,000 a month in revenue, it doesn't mean that that's oh geez, I'm just stuck at that 100,000. I can't sell it or flip it or whatever I want to do. So, but generally speaking, having that full portability, it allows a whole variety of other different buyers. So it could be a processor, okay? And let's say you've got a low risk book. The processor may have an issue where they need to balance their bin and they've got mostly high risk transactions. So now they buy yours, they move it off of the current processor, put it onto themselves. Well, all of a sudden now they look at the transaction count. It's a much cleaner blend of high risk, low risk transactions. That's got value to them. Why? Because they're making 200, 300, 400 basis points off of their high risk merchants. You just sold them a low risk book that might have been priced at, who knows, 40 basis points or something like that. They don't care. They don't care if they give it away. They just want to make sure that they're balancing, typically, at least historically, it's been that way for the high risk. And then there's other purposes. Other people have favorable deals with sponsor banks, certain sponsor banks. They want to grab that book. They want to move it onto their own bank. There's a variety of different things. And so effectively, it also, it gives them the right to touch the merchant directly.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's a big one, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And the retails is, you can't really touch them directly, which is not to say, depending on the agreement, that you can't maybe sell them other services so long as they're not directly competing or you're trying to pull their merchant services away. But generally speaking, it allows a lot more latitude. So I would say to you that the bump in valuation, is probably somewhere, I don't know, I'm throwing a dart here, but it's probably around 15%, 20% more if you've got a fully portable book versus something that's retail. It depends, but there's certainly a bigger market for that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because it almost kind of takes a transaction from, like you said, it's not that you can't get a great deal at 100,000, 300,000 as a retail ISO, monthly residuals, but there it's just a financial transaction. So it's in some ways, it's a really simple deal because it's like, okay, we're buying this future income. I mean, let's, what's the present value of it? And here we go. And let's figure out our ROI and here's your price. Right. Versus when it's wholesale, it's like, they're buying those merchant accounts. They're buying relationships. They're going to want to dig in and like, okay, wait a minute. We have this great technology product that we could actually sell into your book and et cetera, et cetera. Even things like, price increases, things of that nature, that maybe aren't as popular to talk about, but they happen. And you can't do that if you have a retail book with somebody else. But if you bring it in house, all of a sudden it gives you a lot of options. So we talked about that, Lane. What are some other ones? What are some other tips for these larger organizations that are looking to exit 3 to 5 years? What should they be thinking about in 2022?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think if you're building a larger ISO, you're looking to exit. Again, you got to keep your eye on the ball in terms of what you don't want to appear as and don't want to be is a churn and burn shop. And I've come across, I think I'm sure you have as well, James, quite a few of these during my career, which you hear somebody that they're signing 400 merchants a month and they got this amazing count and everything else. And what you're not hearing from them is that they're losing 390 merchants a month, right?
Right.
So, and again, it's great to be signing them, but if they're leaving as quickly or sometimes faster, a buyer sees that immediately. And there's, that's a very tough sell. So it's all about building stickiness, through some sort of value add. Either you've tied into something, you're a specialist in something, or you've built some sort of ingenious sales machine where you're able to just find these people, again, find them without losing them anywhere near as quickly as you're bringing them on, and you just keep having this revenue. And even if there's margin compression, it's still okay because this is a growing machine. Mm-hmm. So I like to look for that. I like to look for things where there's some sort of specialization in some sort of a few key areas. That always becomes attractive. For example, let's say that you've got some sort of specialization in medical somehow. You're tied into elective surgeries or this thing or that thing or whatever your little play is there. It then becomes interesting for other software and out of industry, outside of the payments industry type companies that may be a large medical provider, maybe a chain of medical clinics or something else that now sees this as an opportunity of, wow, we can pick up this payment platform company that we can now push out to all of our clinics. And so now we can own our own payments game and we can make, and getting this extra revenue stream off of all of our own. So when you start to make plans where you've got some sort of forte or specialty, et cetera, it starts to provide value. I will say this, the generalist, if you collected a ton of merchants, there still is some other value out there because there are web companies, there are hosting companies, developing all sorts of other things that they haven't
generally applicable.
They want to go in and they want to upsell those merchants on their services. So again, but keeping those merchants, building your revenue stream, showing a low churn, all super important for the long run in terms of being able to establish value.
Love it. Well, Lane, this conversation has been extremely insightful. I've really enjoyed it. Before we end, though, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience a little bit more about 733 Park. What exactly do you do? What kind of deals should people be thinking about that, hey, I need to think about Lane when I'm in this situation? Give us a little context of the types of partnerships and deals that you're looking for, and also give our audience a way to reach out in that case.
Think of it as the elevator pitch.
Yes.
You got it. Thank you, Patty. So effectively, 733 Park, we do everything from valuations on portfolios, valuations on ISOs. We represent ISOs and portfolios for sale, and we also represent buyers that come to us that are looking to do certain things. They have a special reason, a software company looking to buy certain types of portfolios, et cetera, et cetera. At the moment, we've got a variety of very aggressive buyers looking to buy small to mid and large retail and wholesale books. We got buyers looking for things on their own bin. And we're representing some very interesting ISOs that range everywhere from about $1 million in EBITDA up to about $10 million in EBITDA. So we are market makers in the space. We've been doing this for 20 years. I almost said 30 years, but give it a few years. We've been doing it for a long time. If you want to reach us, best way is hit our website, hopefully easy to remember, 733park.com. That's 733park.com, or Google me, Lane Gordon. Usually there aren't too many of us, and you can find me. And love to get on the phone, love to talk to you if you get an ISO portfolio, etc. We can talk strategy 3 years out, or we can talk about positioning today. So thank you. I appreciate that opportunity, James.
Oh, thank you. Like James said, this has been incredibly insightful, especially for me. I'm a sort of a payments maven, so, understanding how the valuation process goes. Thank you so much for helping me and helping our listeners.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to speak to you in the future. And thank you again, and Happy New Year.
So Patty, our podcast sponsor, of course, is the processor agnostic gateway accept.blue. It's accept.blue is the website, no .com or .net. I thought today, Patty, I would just highlight what I think is a great feature. It's something that a lot of different gateways do provide, but accept.blue has a little bit of a different spin on it, and that is their hosted payment pages and email invoices.
Yes, yes, right.
The big difference with that is that they allow the merchant to really white label those and kind of make them their own, which is very nice. And so what will happen is, when you think about a merchant today and you think about the point of sale and how it's changed with this kind of omni-channel focus,
right.
Merchants want to be able to accept payments. They should be accepting payments in a variety of ways. And with accept.blue, you can really add 2 additional ways that they can accept payments very, very easily. Number one is a hosted payments page. I mean, it's the easiest thing ever. Literally, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a link to a web page. When you go to that web page, it says, hey, you want to pay this merchant some money? Go ahead. And the consumer can put their information in.
Yep.
But the amount they want to pay.
I've done it with several doctors, for example, right?
Yep. And so a lot of companies will just put that link right on their website. We'll click on it. They'll go and make a payment. And of course, as we talked about last week, accept.blue also allows them to have that ACH option,
which is very important,
which is fantastic, especially for larger transactions. And you can do the non-cash adjustment type program and change that based on ACH versus credit. The other really simple way is with email invoicing. And this has been around for a long time, but again, accept.blue just has a really simplified, unique way that they go about it. And their interface is so easy that a merchant could it's a no brainer. You log in, you create a new invoice, you email it.
Yeah,
it's really sleek. It's really nice. And when that customer clicks the link, they're going to be taken to a page where the amount is preloaded and where they can, again, choose ACH or credit. And again, that's just really, really nice. And again, you don't have to enable ACH, but for these, a lot of the card not present, contractor type merchants, they really enjoy having that. And it just really enables them to collect a lot more payments. So,
and the B2B players also really appreciate that. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you haven't done so already, and you're a listener to the podcast and you get value from it, please support our sponsors. That's really important to Patty and I. That's how we continue to do the podcast, and why one of the big reasons we do it is we want to educate the industry. But hey, we have sponsors and we want them to do well. So if you haven't done so already, please go to accept.blue. Again, no .com, no .net, anything like that. It's just accept.blue. Type that into your web browser right now. If you haven't done so yet, click on the contact us. Reach out to them, get a free demo, tell them that you heard about it on the podcast. We would appreciate that. And I know that you're going to really enjoy what you see from accept.blue.
Yeah.
And now, here is Questions from the Field with James Shepard.
So Patty, in today's Questions from the Field, I actually just wanted to tell a very interesting story from an agent and talk about the impact of cash discounting and surcharging on portfolio valuation, but not exactly in the way you might think. So I was talking to an agent recently. This is an agent that, I'm a consultant for him. And so he pays for my time. And, so anyway, well, one of the opportunities that came up was there was a competitor that had a small portfolio. I think it was around $4,000 a month in residual. And this competitor is really interesting. So this is an individual who was in the payments industry like 10 years ago, built a portfolio to like 6,000. and then kind of went dormant with it and just almost kind of retired with it. And now is looking to actually retire, doesn't want to take the calls anymore from the clients, looking for somebody else with a high level of service and all this. So, so this individual went in and I walked him through, and, we talked through all of this and I helped him figure it out. And so he went in and buys his portfolio. Now, the reason that he bought this portfolio was not to buy the 4,000. So that 4,000, I think he ended up getting it for, I don't remember the number, something like a 16x or something like that. So very, very reasonable multiple. And a big part of it really was his promise to like maintain the high level of service and all that. The person cared about the reputation. So anyway, gets the deal done. But the reason that I advised that he really move forward quickly and get this deal done is that this guy had signed a 5-year agreement that basically the ISO never thought it would matter, but the 5-year agreement basically said at the end of 5 years, you can call and flip the accounts if you want, Well,
wow.
He was able to assume this agreement without any substantive change to it. He was able to get the 4,000 a month, and then he was able to follow up with all of these clients that were in Interchange Plus and flip a bunch of them to cash discounting. So he bought a $4,000 portfolio. Last I talked to him, he was making $11,000 a month on that portfolio.
Wow.
And this was like over the course of like 8 months. He went from 4,000 to 11.
Wow.
Now, this is something that I'm seeing as well with a lot of agents who have an existing book and they're reaching out to them. And so one thing that I would really challenge our audience on as you go into 2022, as you think about income opportunities in 2022, let me just challenge you on a couple things real quick. Number one, look at your current portfolio. You may or may not like cash discounting. You may not like non-cash adjustment. You may not like compliant surcharging. I don't know, whatever your opinion is, but just understand you have a lot of competitors that are going to be pitching your merchants on these programs this year. Yeah. So if they haven't already been pitched, I'm sure they have, but if they haven't already been pitched a lot, they're going to get pitched a lot more. And this is the thing. The offers they're going to get pitched are a lot more compelling in 2022 than they were in 2021 and way more than they were in 2020. So meaning the offers they're going to get now is, hey, we'll come in and install a brand new point of sale system for you. That's like a nice one for free. And we'll, people are really starting to understand.
All these other value adds will give you,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like cash discounting. People are starting to think, like, as Lane mentioned, thinking it's going to stay around for a little while. Well, if it's going to stay around for a little while, how much would you spend to go get one of these accounts? I mean, it's worth $3,000 or $4,000 investment in a point of sale or whatever to get a big account. So just understand that it might be time for you as we move into 2022 to just evaluate your portfolio, take a look at it. What percentage of your portfolio is on cash discount surcharge? If you're less than 30% cash discount and surcharge, there's almost certainly opportunity for you there. And when I say opportunity, I mean, low hanging fruit, like make a phone call and probably with one, face-to-face interaction with your clients, probably 30 to 35% of them will go to one of these programs, especially if you have multiple options available, which is my favorite way to do it. So, and again, if you do that, especially on your larger accounts, this is the thing, but I see a lot of agents making a mistake is they'll go after their smaller accounts. Well, my smaller merchants, they might want this. Well, what you don't realize is now, because of technology advancements and everything and acceptance, your larger merchants might want this as well. And you look at a small account, you're like, well, I'm making 80 basis points of margin. Now I'm going to make 160 because I do cash discount or surcharging or something, right? Or maybe it's 180. Well, that's awesome. You just like almost, you doubled or a little bit more than doubled your residuals on that account. Well, that's good. Here's where the real opportunity is though. The real opportunity is you've got that merchant doing 100,000 a month in volume and you're making 10 basis points. Well, guess what? They're going to do 3.5% non-cash adjustment because that's just what it is. You're not going to have to discount it the way you would traditional. So now you're going to go from 10 basis points to 150. Yeah. That's incredible. You just multiplied your residuals on a big account, multiplied your residuals by 15. It's insane. It's like you literally just sold 15 big accounts by taking one account you already have and converting them to cash discount. So that's a really, really big deal. And so, just think about that. Something for you to think about. And secondly, what I'd say is 2022, I've talked about it so many times. It's funny, actually. It's one of the things I've gotten a lot of disagreement about from people, online communities and things like that. And I'm going to continue talking about it because I know I'm right. So, but this idea of using capital, I know the ISOs hate it when I talk about this because they don't want to put the money out, which I think is absolutely stupid. I don't know what the problem is, honestly.
It's
I mean,
not
I'm
wise
sorry.
It's not a wise business strategy to hold on to your cash if you're
No,
trying to grow your company.
and it's not a wise decision to not go get more cash if there's super profitable things to invest it in. So, the bottom line is 2022 is the year where if you're turning away a cash discount deal because of an investment that needs to be made to get it, you're an idiot.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but it's just stupid. I don't know what you're thinking. I really don't. I mean, if it's a reasonable investment and it's like, when I say reasonable, I mean, you're going to make at least 100% ROI on this investment. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? I don't understand. Like, do you have a retirement account? Are you excited about your 8% return? Like, okay. So what are you thinking? I don't get it. I really don't. So I talk to people all the time, Patty. It's so funny. Like, I'll talk about deals all the time. And it's like, oh, I would have got this one deal, but they already have this point of sale system. And I'm like, well, did you offer to replace it? Oh, mine, no, it would have cost $50,000 to replace it. I'm like, why? Well, because it's 10 locations. They do $70,000 a month per location. And I'm thinking, hello?
$70,000 a month per location?
Right. And so you're going to make what? You're going to make 200 basis points? You're like, I just don't understand. I really don't. So 2022 is the year that you need to be thinking in terms of how to reinvest your capital, how to access other capital from your ISO, from your processing companies, from banks, from whoever. And it's hard to not find capital at a rate that would make it a reasonable investment to get 100% return. So be thinking about that. Don't lose deals. Go to market with your best offer. 2022 is probably going to be your last chance to go after cash discounting in a market where you're pretty much, there's a lot of competition already, but there's still some open runway ahead of you in 2022. A lot of open runway,
And I think your point is well taken, James. It's not like you have to go out and find new customers to pitch cash discounting to. You already, most people listening already have a portfolio with merchants on Interchange Plus or something else. All you can do is, the best thing to do is to go into your merchant, say, hey, you know what? I can save you even more money if you do this.
Right. And say, hey, here's a program. Do you want it or not? A third of them are going to want it. And then, then you can continue, making sure everybody knows about it. You're going to get another third over the next few years as people are starting to hear about it more. And they're like, oh, that's right. But, I know that Susan said she offers that. I'm going to call her back, So that's important. But then again, even going out and getting new accounts, if you're going out to get a new account, what is this barrier? It's just so frustrating. Like, I'll give you another one that I love, Patty, that I say that facetiously, I would have sold this merchant, but they already have a Clover and you can't swap out Clover. And I'm like, okay, hold on a minute. You were going to sell a cash discount deal to a merchant doing $50,000 a month and they need an $1,100 device. You needed to buy them a new $1,100 device and scrap their old one. And you said, no, you're going to make $1,100 a month in residual. Like, what are you thinking? Go back to your ISO if you're broke and say, hey, I need $1,100. Take it out of my first month of residual. I'll break even that month. Right. And then I'll make $1,100 a month forever. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it just because I get frustrated when I see agents and individual agents, especially when I see them, not understanding what's possible. And then when I see ISOs acting against their own interests.
Yeah, that's the part that blows my mind.
It's like, well, James, why do you keep talking about that? My agents keep calling me, asking me for money so they can go get these cash discount deals. And I'm like, you're welcome. Why are you upset with me about this? You're welcome. Yeah, your agent's reaching out to you saying, I need $10,000 so that I can make you, $800 a month. And you're looking for acquisitions? You're crazy. Take the money that's right in front of you. Right. So anyway, all that to say, 2022 is the year to put some capital out there to get bigger accounts on cash discounting, because this is the year where bigger accounts with cash discounting is the open market. Like, that's where it's at, fine dining restaurants, and things like that. But, larger merchants, that's the open market. There's still a lot of room in the smaller ones, but nobody's been selling the big ones. And this is the year that everybody's going to start selling them. So the winners are going to be the ones that are saying, we've got capital, we're willing to invest it to get these big accounts. So take a look at your current portfolio, go get some new accounts, leverage your capital, make a lot more money in 2022.
Great advice, James. Thanks.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
Well, James, we have more bad news for MasterCard and Visa from across the pond, as they say.
Okay.
Last fall, you may recall, Amazon announced that it would stop accepting Visa cards issued by banks in the UK,
Sure.
citing rising interchange.
Yep.
At the same time, of course, Visa said, as we expected, Visa said it was in discussions with Amazon on a resolution. We even speculated here, I believe, that Amazon was using this threat as sort of a negotiating tool, to carve out some better rates. It's a tactic that's been used by other retailers like Kroger and Walmart. So, but last week, Amazon execs told a UK news outlet, The Mirror, that there had been no resolution and that the company would no longer accept UK Visa cards beginning January 19th, which is right after this podcast goes out. Also last week, UK lawmakers said they plan to scrutinize Visa and MasterCard interchange after the country's payments regulator said it had found no evidence to justify ongoing interchange hikes. The UK's payment system regulator, in a report in November, found that British retailers with card sales ranging between 15,000 and 50 million British pounds, which is roughly $20,000 to $69 million, those are the guys that are being really hit hard by rising increase.
And by the way, I have to back up for 1 second. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Just for context here. So the rates in the UK that they are saying are prohibitively high for merchants.
And they're the lowest in the industry.
They are I believe it's 0.27% is the average effective rate. Of interchange.
And it can go up as high as 0.3 for debit cards.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is but if you look at the average, I saw some numbers, and the average effective rate of interchange is something like 0.27. Right. It's like, and this is prohibitively high and is requiring additional regulation. Hello, here we are in the good old US of A processing, I don't know, 30 times more than they do in the UK, maybe 50 times more, I don't know. We're paying effective rate of 1.8%. That's unbelievable. I mean, we're 6 times higher than the UK. So the context of all of this thing that Amazon is doing and all these different, and the interchange is going up and how the merchants are upset and how the government's taking action, just bear in mind, this is a country that is paying 1/6 the interchange effective rate that we are. So anyway, I just had to throw that out.
And it's also interesting too, because I think there's like sort of an international kind of squabble here, because while Visa was raised, basically Visa was, when it broke out of Brexit, that's when this whole ball began unspooling, because in the EU they had they set these caps of 2% and 0.2% and 0.3%. And when Britain exited the UK, that meant the caps no longer applied. So not surprisingly, Visa and MasterCard took that opportunity to raise interchange.
Oh, no, that's interesting. I actually hadn't thought about that. I actually didn't think about that. So hold on a second. So let me back up for a second. So actually the thing that they're complaining about is under the EU, they did have the 0.2 and 0.3% caps.
Right.
Now, after Brexit, those no longer exist. And now Visa and MasterCard are trying to raise interchange rates.
Free to do what they want. Yes.
Okay, I got it. All right. Now I'm up to speed.
You see what I mean? And especially it's difficult because, Britain's just a small part of Europe. It's no bigger than, say, the state of California or something, right?
Right.
And all those people are buying things online from other European countries.
Right.
And that's where, a lot of the complaints are coming. Because it's like, wait a minute, if I buy it here in the UK, it's maybe 0.2, but if I buy it from Germany, it's going to be 0.3 or 4. Yeah. And that's how Visa and MasterCard started this. And I think it's also worth noting that at the time that Visa decided to do that, and actually here, cross borders are 1.5% for credit and 1.15% for debit. But, the thing is that they announced these increases at the same time that they're scrapping plans to hike interchange here in the U.S.
Right.
If you remember last winter, Visa and MasterCard.
And it's not like businesses in Britain have had an easier time of it than we have.
Right. Exactly.
It's been harder, really.
Some people would say it's been harder, know. And so none of this obviously has been overlooked by the payment systems regulator, which says it's planning, quote, remedies. And then a leader in the chairman of the Treasury Committee, which is a panel in Parliament that's roughly equivalent to our banking committees. Says it's going to hold hearings with leadership PSR in early March to explore these remedies. I just love this quote from the chairman of that committee. Given that Visa and MasterCard currently dominate this space, it's vital to ensure there is sufficient regulation and competition in the market so that businesses are not subject to ever increasing servicing charges.
Right. And all they have to do to see that playing out is to look at the US market.
Exactly.
I'm not a big fan of regulation, don't get me wrong, but
no.
Something needs to be done, and I think something is being done. I think in the US we are handling this the way that we handle it, which is with the free market through surcharging, cash discounting, non-cash adjustment.
Right.
And, merchants are saying no. And, we're doing a free market approach. So I think we have a very different culture, very different market in terms of how we look at regulation. But I think ultimately, this idea that the cost of processing payments, the actual true cost of processing payments continues to decline while the cost to business owners to process payments continues to go up.
Yeah. That's the equilibrium is way off on there, and right. It's not just the merchants
right.
that are tiring of this.
Yeah, well, and you know that it's not a fully free market system when that happens, right? Because let's say, and again, I know I'm going off track here a little bit, but I'm very passionate about this stuff because when you think about it, let's say we had a business that makes widgets. Right. And they're selling these widgets for $10 and the cost to make a widget is $5. They have a 50% margin, right? Right. Well, what's going to happen if their cost goes down to $2 to make a widget, but they raise their price to $15? Well, what's going to happen is there's going to be another competitor that's going to say, hey, we're selling widgets for $9 because the cost is only $2. Like, there's going to be another company that's going to come in and say, well, wait a minute, we'll take that. We don't mind taking a lower slice of the profit in order to get a big piece of the market. So that's what happens in a free market system. When you see that doesn't happen, you know that you're not dealing with a free market system there, and you're dealing with either a monopoly, collusion, both. And so
duopoly, which is really what we have here.
Exactly.
Duopoly.
Exactly. Right. And so now again, I know there's others that might disagree that would say, well, yeah, but look at the card benefits in the EU and how, there's not as many of the cashback rewards and all of that there versus here. And there's not all those incentives, but I would say it's a mature market. I am going to pay with my card because I don't pay with cash. That's how I pay for things, with my card. Do I like the cash back? Sure, I'll take it if you give it to me. Is that dramatically impacting my decision to use plastic versus cash? No, I'm going to use plastic all day. Now I don't even use plastic. I use my phone. I'm using Apple Pay. I think it's a mature market. And so anyway, I know I'm stealing your thunder a bit, but
No. I mean, basically we've hit all my points, which is that, this is really a free market issue and we don't have a free market. And, I think it's very interesting that what happens in Europe eventually crosses the ocean and comes here.
It does.
So I'm just sort of warning people. This is sort of like a warning siren that we could expect some debate on regulation in the U.S. as well.
I agree. Good stuff, Patty. Thanks for sharing it.
Sure thing, man.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.